So this year is flying by, and here it is almost July already, and it's summer again suddenly. And that generally means there's lots of outdoor activities like weddings and family reunions and picnics and things like that. So I was thinking of trying to come up with an excellent summer fruit pie that I haven't already done on the channel, and I thought of the classic blueberry lattice pie. Now, these beautiful pies come with a bit of a quirk in that blueberries, even though they do have a fair amount of pectin in them, it never seems to be quite enough, you know, if you don't add some kind of a thickening agent to it. When you cut into the pie, even if you've left it refrigerate overnight or completely cool down, a lot of times the berries just fall right out of the pie, and you don't get a perfect pie wedge that you see in the magazines with the ice cream all over it, that kind of thing. So I thought, well, I'm going to give you some of my top tips and tricks on how you can create a beautiful pie like this that actually holds together. If you don't do it correctly, you can end up with a blueberry filling that tastes a lot more like library glue than a blueberry pie filling. So we're going to go over to the test kitchen here and give this a try, and I'll see you over there. So the key with this flaky pie dough is to not overwork the butter into the flour. You want to make sure that there's visible pieces of butter still throughout the mixture before you add in the ice water with salt. Just little pieces of butter like that will create a flaky, tender crust once it has a chance to rest in the refrigerator. As I said, baking the perfect blueberry pie is actually way more challenging than most people would suspect. I mean, honestly, what could be easier, right? You just throw a bunch of blueberries into a pie shell, bake it off, and call it a day. And unfortunately, it's really not a simple matter, because 9 times out of 10, if you try just baking a bunch of berries in a pie shell with some sugar, the problem is when you go to slice it, it's just gonna, splat. I actually consulted Nick Malgeri's book, How to Bake. It's this was put out in 1995. I believe it won the James Beard Award that year or the following year for best book on baking. And on page 160, I found his recipe, and I kind of adapted this recipe off of his recipe. So I wanted to give credit where credit is due. I mean, Nick is the man. He actually is one of the founding chefs for the Culinary Institute in New York. So I'm going by his measurements and putting this pie together, kind of using some of his techniques, how he did his classic blueberry lattice pie. So if you don't have this, it's definitely a book that I go back and consult again and again and again over the years. He always has, when you're stuck on something just isn't working out, usually if you can find one of his recipes, he can iron out the kinks for you. That's why I like this book. And it is definitely a baking classic. So all that said, I'm using some of his techniques and made a couple of modifications of my own with this. Now, in a 9-inch pie shell, I'm using a 9-inch pie dish. He has 1.5 pounds of blueberries. Now, I'm using organic frozen blueberries. You can definitely use fresh. I just find these are easier to deal with. So what I have here is I split 1.5 pounds of blueberries into a 1/2 pound and 1 pound. Now the 1/2 pound, just keep those in the freezer or in the refrigerator, keep them nice, and we'll deal with that later. But first we have to cook this off and thicken this part of the blueberries. So I'm going to give all of the weights and measures down in the description box as always. So for now, we're just going to kind of go over the technique and the method of how this cooked version goes together. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do here is put the pound of blueberries into a pot. Small stainless steel, non-reactive sauce pot. Turn it on low, and over that we're going to pour some organic granulated sugar and just a 1/4 teaspoon or so sea salt goes in there. And now we're gonna cook that down. Make sure you don't burn this or walk away from it for too long. So another thing we're going to put into this is some nutmeg and some cinnamon. You can omit the spices if you don't like if you just want to taste blueberries, that's fine. Personally, I find that blueberry pie needs a little bit of help when it comes to the flavor department. We are going to add some fresh squeezed lemon juice and lemon zest, but not right now because the acid can counteract the holding the holding consistency of the cornstarch. So put the lemon juice and the lemon zest over the 1/2 pound of berries that we reserved, that we're going to keep those nice and frozen. So we're going to let this come up to temperature here, and you want to get a nice simmer on that, and then we'll come back in a second here and show you how this goes together. Okay, so this has been simmering about 5 minutes or so, and you don't want to break these berries down too much, so just make sure that it's at a simmer or the cornstarch slurry will not thicken it properly. So just take it off the heat for a second while you make your slurry. I think this is a 1/4 cup here, and I'm just going to put enough water in it to get this into a slurry. You don't want to use too much water in it. So once you get that smooth and there's no lumps, then you can start to thicken this. You want to get this to a pretty good thickness here. So if you have to add a little more slurry, don't be shy. You have to get this fairly thick because you're going to be adding this to fresh berries. Well, in this case, some frozen organic ones. So you definitely want to bring this back up to the simmer and make sure that it's nice and thick. This has to cook probably for a minute or two because you want to get that raw cornstarch taste out of it. And make sure you're stirring this the entire time, or it will stick and burn bad on the bottom of your pan and you'll have to start over. So you'll see it thicken after a minute or so. Just cook it till it's completely thickened before you pull it off. Stirring the entire time. It should look like a beautiful blueberry jam. It's thickening at the same time. A lot of the water is evaporating, steaming out of it, which is what you want. So there you have it. That's a thickened blueberry filling. Now, once you pull this off, you have to let this cool down completely ice cold before you add into the berries, into the fresh berries, or it'll just defeat the purpose of doing this. So let this cool, put it into the refrigerator. So now it's time to assemble this pie, but before we can bake it, we have to finish off this blueberry filling. So I have the half-pound reserved blueberries, which I've kept frozen, and I have our completely cold, cooked blueberry filling that we made earlier. And so with these uncooked berries here, the first thing I'm going to do is toss them with I'll go 2 tablespoons of flour with that, and I'm going to add a tablespoon, maybe 2 tablespoons of fresh squeezed lemon juice and the zest from that lemon. Toss that together here. So once you have that tossed there, now I'm going to put the cooked filling in here on top of those berries. So now I'm just going to combine all of that in there. And you should already have your oven preheated to 375, 400, depends on how hot your oven runs. So before I fill this prepared pie shell, I'm going to put some of that streusel on the bottom to soak up any inadvertent blueberry juices. And you don't want to go too much on that. Probably only going to use maybe a 1/4 cup of streusel altogether on the bottom there. And then just go ahead and fill your pie shell. Make sure that you're completely filled and there's no empty spaces. And you might just want to give this a tap, a little bit of a tap, or even smack that down just a little bit. So I've already made my lattice top on the back of a sheet pan, which I've kept cold. So let me go get that. So I've just made some egg wash here with a whole egg, splash of cream, and a dash of salt to whip that up real well. And I'm going to go around the outside of this pie. The reason why I'm doing this is so the lattice top that I made will stick well to that crust on the outside. So now I'm just going to dot the top of this pie with a little bit of butter, just maybe a ½ ounce to an ounce of butter here on top. And this will just aid in browning and making the lattice top look really beautiful. So now, unless you're a professional baker and you're making lattice tops every day, I would definitely recommend doing your lattice top on the back of a pan to keep it cold so it doesn't fall apart on you. So you just want to plop that lattice right on top. Oh, lost a piece of butter there. Well, I'll sneak it back in there. Okay, so now you're going to want to press that down, that lattice top down into that egg wash nicely, so you create a good seal there. And if you practice a little bit at the lattice, you know, you could get a nice looking top. It never comes out as beautiful as we want, but you could get close to that beautiful picnic pie that you're looking for. So once you have that nicely pressed down all around, then you really don't need to do too much more to it. You just cut down along the perimeter with a sharp knife. And then save your scraps and always make something with these later, preferably with more blueberries, since there's blueberries all over it, but that's okay. Definitely going to save that pie dough. So then lastly, all you want to do is make sure that you get a good amount of egg wash on your pie there. And that also will help with the browning. Give it a nice, beautiful golden brown and delicious look. And of course, last but not least, some shaggy. Nice size, you can use a nice size crystal like turbinado. This is organic, so it's already got a nice crystal, larger crystal. It's less processed. And this will give it an interesting contrast on top as well. I like to go pretty good with that amount on there to give it some color and sweetness. And then into the oven, just as it is. I'd say after you turn the temperature down, I'll probably bake it at 375, 400 for about 10 minutes or so, and then turn it down for another maybe 35. I'm thinking 40. We'll see. All right, so I am taking this pie out right around 46 minutes. I ended up tenting the outside of the pie for about 15 or 20 minutes of it, just because the crust around the outside was getting a little dark. So I don't know if you can see it or not, but you can tell that it's bubbling a little bit in the center. That's one of the signs that I'm looking for. So yeah, I would say that's golden brown and delicious. Okay, so this pie has to set up in the refrigerator. I'm actually going to let this set up and get cold overnight before I even try to slice into it. It needs at least 4 to 6 hours, and really I think you should just let it go overnight. You'll have less problems getting a clean slice when you're slicing a cold pie. So I've given our blueberry lattice pie about 12 hours overnight in the refrigerator to set up nice. I sliced this about 5 minutes ago. And in case you're wanting to get nice clean slices like I have here, I used a serrated bread knife like this. I think you can slice through the crust nicely without caving in all that beautiful lattice work. And as you can see, it has kept its shape very nicely, exactly what I wanted. It's not gushing out of the pie, but yet I would say that it's slowly oozing, which I love. So it's not like you set it with Jello or something like that. It's still a beautiful berry pie. It smells amazing. Now normally I would not be caught dead eating an exquisite summer berry pie like this without a cup of coffee, but it's a little late in the day for me, so we're just going to give this a try, and I'm going to give you my true feelings. I have not tried this pie. I don't make these very often because they are a little tricky. So I'm just going to dig right in here, destroy this gorgeous pie. Get some of that pastry and those ripe berries. Wow. Yeah, that's, you already know, that's dynamite. Doesn't get a whole lot better than that. Yeah, that all butter pastry crust, and the berries are at the peak of ripeness. When they freeze those organic berries, they're at their absolute peak, so you get the ultimate flavor of those blueberries in there. And by only cooking 2/3 of the filling with the thickener and then adding back in with some uncooked berries, you still have that succulent blueberry, bursting flavor that you're looking for, and the tanginess of the lemon in the background. Perfect. So I hope if you have something fun to do with your family and friends, you give this pie a try. It is a bit of a project, but I believe the classic beauty of this pie is worth the effort. So give it a try, and if you do, please leave me a comment, thumbs up, and I'll catch you next time.